Hello, everybody in podcast land. Welcome to Shock Talk. Now you may have noticed that we are missing Mike Ritchie. So I'm sure this podcast is going to be a complete disaster, but we're going to try to.
He fell out of bed this morning and fractured an ankle. Not really. He's on travel. He's on company travel.
Was that a height joke?
He's on. Yeah.
Mike Ritchie.
We love Mike Ritchie.
He is out doing training with customers.
He's currently in Pennsylvania on a road trip in a booster seat with Paul Bride.
So we're just going to have to go without Mike, unfortunately. So I'm going to try to be the moderator of this.
Mediator.
The mediator.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to reel Junior in, but to take my place on the left-hand side, we've got Ryan Flanders,
GQ.
Product Management, GQ.
GQ.
We just found out that
the only swipe right. I like it.
We thought Ryan was a Gen X, but it turns out he's a millennial.
No, he's on the cusp. So we can actually claim him as a Gen X.
We can claim him as a Gen X.
We claim him for sure.
My house phone had a cord, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
For sure.
And
how many times did you fall asleep talking to chicks on that phone?
Yeah, I couldn't spit game. I was too busy in the cars. This doesn't help you talk
That's
to women.
weak, man. You should have been able to do both. Anyway, today's topic is vans, camper vans. RVs.
Things of that nature.
Things of that nature.
And
we do know people that out there that are using their Kia Rio as a camper van, but we're not going to touch on you guys today.
Not today.
And at some point, we'll talk about Forerunners. So anyways.
Oh, I'm sure.
How do we start this off?
Or a Rubicon or something. Anyway, so so let's talk about how van life started.
It used to be the weird guy down, the van by the river.
Yeah,
right?
but even before it turned creepy, I feel like
70s vans.
No, see, I feel like
those
70s. Oh yeah,
vans.
with the offset wheels in the back,
you
got to
have the big mural
and the narrows.
Absolutely,
the mural
with the bubble window.
Yeah, I want to
pick
pick up.
Who's the boss? Like 70s, early 80s, I think owning a full-size Chevy van or Dodge Tradesman or something like that was a cool thing.
Did they have a term for the guy who had the bed in the back of the van? They didn't call that van life.
That was creepy.
They didn't call that van life.
That was creepy. But I think
that was living though.
Yeah, but I think that it was a cool thing and everyone wanted a van. The Westphalia fit in there, the half-ton van.
That was later. I'm thinking Krager's on a
but that was 70s.
Square body van, or
C10,
that's when the Dodge vans were real popular.
Yeah, the Tradesman.
Yeah.
Remember how they used to do the shag carpet on the side?
Oh, yeah.
Back in the day when we used to drink from the hose
the tassel.
And eat grass,
yeah.
Our parents were driving around.
In the vans.
In the vans, yeah.
No seatbelts. You're just bouncing around in those, you'd fall asleep in the van.
And the vinyl that they upgraded to that. Remember
it?
That 70s vinyl that you would your ass would slide right off the van seat?
Right. And on a hot day or stick to it.
And they only had lap belts.
Yeah. If you had lap belts. But you had captain's chairs. And you really felt like you were, sailing the seas.
But you had 15 by 10s and 15 by 8s in the front with traction bars on the back of a 318 that had 145 horsepower.
I love small block engines, man.
Yeah, but
I'm a Dodge guy.
I love the murals because the van lifers now are so boring.
So there was I think there was a couple sitcoms back in the day that turned this on, and I think A-Team.
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 They started the whole van movement. I think them. Then Who's the Boss with the sky blue van that Tony Danza used to roll.
But you can't just roll over you can't just bypass the A-Team that quickly. A-Team was
they were
every day after school. Get home in time to watch the A-Team.
Pity the
Night
fool.
Rider, Airwolf.
Oh yeah,
man, grew up on these things. Maybe if you had no school, you could watch Chips, and then The Price is Right. Yeah. I mean, you had a full day.
I think there was a lot of
everyone had
TV,
had to have the
channel 2, 4,
the
5.
bubble windows cut into the back, and then the roof vent cut into the roof, and I mean it was gangster. And then you remember Stoll, that manufacturer that way before Billet that built the square edged thick grill inserts for the van.
I still have one on my truck.
Oh my God, get rid of that thing.
No, just loving it.
I want to know when that fad's coming back. It's
here. It's here. That's why we're talking about where it started. It's here.
Well, currently vans,
but there was an era where
are back in right now.
But there was an era like in the 90s and the 2000s where vans were just creepy to own.
100%.
Like if you saw a half-ton van rolling by
A school.
Okay. I didn't want to say it, but you did. Yeah, if you saw a van rolling by a school, you were it. You were loaded and ready to go. You feel what I'm saying? But now vans have made a move, and I'm going to tell you what. I used to own.
Didn't you have one?
I've had many. Okay. So I had a 4.3 liter shorty. I had a 4.3 liter shorty GM van that was slammed.
Is it an Astro?
No, it was a half-ton van with a 4.3 liter. It had a 700 R4 tranny.
But it wasn't.
It was
an
a cargo
van.
No,
it was a cargo.
It was a cargo. So shorty. It was the G10. Shorty, no windows, all white. It was probably meant for forestry use or something, or Navy. But I got a hold of the van and I slammed it to the ground. Got no attention. Like, people were just like, oh my God, his suspension must be blown out. And I'm like, no, this is what I got to work with, so I'm going to drop it on stock steels. But now you see these vans and they're on like offer up and stuff that people want $15,000, $20,000 for.
A ridiculous amount of money.
Crazy.
It reminds me.
I had mine slammed on BILSTEINs.
Slammed on BILSTEINs.
Yeah.
Well, my buddy had an Astro van, all gray, shorty, slammed, right?
Love it.
But on Porsche, what would you call the 5-spoke Porsches?
Fuchs.
Yes. Oh man,
air-cooled Fuchs.
Yeah, it was cool. He was Derek. Shout out. Guy had some style way back then.
But that wasn't style back then.
Tweed,
actually, if you
interior.
had money, you weren't at the junkyard getting Fuchs. You know what you were getting back then? Colorado Custom.
Yes.
Colorado Customs or Centerline Sabres.
Those are huge.
And that's in the mid-90s era when the paint schemes came in. So you had to have the dripping paint.
Scallops. Yeah. Love paint.
Or the music notes into the... Loved it.
So vans have come a long way.
Yeah, and they hold
a soft spot in my heart, right? Yeah. You know, and so... But now...
We don't want to know why, but go ahead.
But now, like, people... I think it's... Instead of a man down by the river, it's content creator out by the lake. So it's kind of the same, but they have like a full-time job and they have an online presence, and they have some money to spend. And instead of having tweed, it's tile and South American like wheatgrass up on the counter. And they're making chai coffees
reclaimed in wooden countertops.
Yes, in their van instead of bars, in their van. So it's things have really changed.
Yeah. Do you think the household tile you get from Home Depot actually stays on the walls when you drive those things around?
Funny thing about that, I did have a 1978 Dodge Establishment, which was 30 foot. And it had, the awful, I think we all remember it from the 70s, like the press counter board stuff that eventually...
Formica.
There we go. Thank you. Would eventually kind of roll up. So we stripped that all off, went to Home Depot, and bought the cheapest white tile. And that was the first time I ever did tile, was in that RV. And I put the tile down, and I learned a lot about grouting. So you can technically use...
But there's so much...
Did it fall off?
No, it did not.
But you know what?
Did not. It was on there.
Answer the question.
But people use van. I don't think it would hold up to today's vans because people use them in like if you can't do a current Sprinter 4-wheel drive that's going to see 150 miles of washboard and expect that your tile and grout's going to hold up, right? You got to use something that has give, like laminate, stuff like that. Anyway,
this thing, I don't know, man. It made a number of trips from San Bernardino up the Cajon Pass on. Towing a boat all the way to Havasu.
How many times did it overheat going up the
Doesn't, man. It had a big block in it. Big block, never overheat.
360?
No, big
440?
Block. 440.
Ooh.
Gas guzzling. Got 8 miles to the gallon, regardless if
2
it was
miles a gallon
or not.
going up the Cajon Pass.
Oh, man, it was great. You hate those Dodges. I love it. I could go through the carburetor, set the timing and the tuning, make sure all the tires are aired up. I love my MPG.
Well, anyways,
let's talk about today's van.
If anybody wants to know, we do make BILSTEIN makes B6 product for a lot of old vans, Chevys, G Series, even Astro vans, E Series, and we also make a lot of shocks for different RVs.
All the Dodge, the B Series vans, the
150, 250, 350,
and it transforms them, especially because so many manufacturers went to the Class B, and they did it without consulting a manufacturer to see if they had anything that would dampen all that additional weight, like road track pleasure way. So all these guys built these Class B vans and basically doubled their weight. And
They sag in the rear.
shocks.
No one built a shock for it, but we do.
We do.
Actually, the heaviest valve shock we make is for a...
Monaco?
No, believe it or not, it's for a GM half-ton van. Because the motion ratios in the front are so crazy. It's like the heaviest valve shock we make is the front of a GM van. Old school GM van.
I'll have to look
like the
that
G10, G20, G30. It's like 9,000 newtons of force on the rebound.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, what happens, they made the shock, they just basically had the stock shocks on those mostly, built all the stuff out, even the Class C.
And then people would drive them and they were like, oh, why do I need Mylanta? I need some Mylanta or some Pepto because I'm woozy.
Get in the back.
And then you put a set of 4600s on it, or B6s. Let's call them
B6s.
B6s. You could put a set of B6s, just transforms it. Like I get calls all the time. Like, hey, I put those B6s on my road trek Dodge van, and it just transformed it. So.
I think though, the interesting thing, I think when you look at the van life, what I like seeing is that there are a number of those old vans and the old, box Chevys out there, and people are still using, but then you can still see them, people, like,
they're not cool.
They're certainly not when somebody's made something out of, a transit van or ProMaster or a Sprinter.
Right. Well,
I beg to differ on the coolness.
Well, it is.
I beg to differ because those old
gas
vans
mileage
are very cool. I think they're far more reliable. I think if you're looking for MPGs, they're definitely not cool. You know what I mean? Because they all had, GM 350s in them or 360s or some sort of big, if they were
they got
one-ton trucks.
They had an 8-cylinder and it's in the 80s. So they're low on horsepower and
big on the doghouse.
Yeah.
So your motor basically sat by your right knee.
Yeah. And it would get real hot when you drove.
It would get hot. And it was loud. And if you were wide open throttle, cancel Christmas. I mean, you couldn't hear your neighbor.
Plus, they went through the period through the 80s and 90s where they're super creepy. So
yeah, they did. They were
like we're from Southern California, San Diego, and
super.
I like to beach cruise.
Yeah,
around the bay, and
when you saw vans,
there's a lot of freaking creepy vans down there.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think the game has changed.
Yes.
I'm going to play Mike now. I'm going to reel us back in. Let me talk. The game has changed because the vehicles are a lot different now. So why don't we talk about the vehicle? So why is a Sprinter and a Transit and a ProMaster, what are the big differences between those and the old vans?
Tons.
Exactly.
Tons of difference. So they're
tons in weight or tons in mechanical differences?
Tons of fun.
Well, they're almost like a large car. Well, let me start off. They all have McPherson strut front suspension.
And most of them are like the ProMasters are front wheel drive. Now even the Sprinters, the new Sprinters are front wheel drive.
Oh yeah.
The ProMasters front wheel drive.
Those are really new Sprinters, and we actually have those shocks. I've yet to find a whole lot of applications for it yet, but we do have them.
Well, the reason, and let me go into why they're doing front wheel drive, because they found that they were losing so much business to ProMaster, because you could take a Class B ProMaster 1500, and I could stand up in the thing because there's no drive line running from the front to the back, so they didn't have to raise the floor. So in order for a Sprinter to be able to you have to have a tall roof to stand in it. So they're like, what do we do to mitigate this from having to have a tall roof and we can have a shorter floor? Let's not put a drive line to the rear, right? So they saw how much sales generated from ProMaster or from that smaller Mercedes. What was it? The Metis or whatever?
Oh, Metris. Chassis.
So they saw
W447.
Yeah, they saw all that, and they're like, maybe we should see if we can offer something that has, and not only the benefit of a lower floor, but the benefit of, because let's get it right. These vans appeal to people.
I got questions. Just remember that.
The people that are a little older, right? So entering and exiting the van's a lot easier with a lower floor.
But here's the thing: is you don't. I see a number of people. I've got a buddy with a Sprinter, and he's already tried to go off-roading in it, you know. And the Sprinter 2-wheel drive, rear wheel gets stuck, right? Where do you think this, you know, front-wheel drive Sprinter is? It, you know, a lot of America is paved, absolutely, right? And like you can go in absolutely anywhere. But I mean, anytime you pull off,
I think the front-wheel drive has a better chance
to
of getting through terrain than rear drive.
You think so?
100%.
With all that weight.
Because you got your transmission.
If you guys don't agree, make sure to leave a comment at the
bottom
of this video.
You got your transmission on the side of the motor. The motor's now horizontally.
Agree. But all that weight's back there.
But how much less time and how much less delay do you have from getting the power to the ground? All that delay in that drive line. Now it's right there. And it's always easier to pull than it is to push. So when you have front drive, you're pulling forward. When you have rear drive, you're pushing forward. And this is exactly why a 110 horsepower Honda Civic would chew up the 155 horsepower 240SX, because a pull is harder on the takeoff than a push. Does that make sense? So you got 155 horsepower.
I just figure you when we do the what is it, para something static loss, right? You know, basically drivetrain, you know, consumption of horsepower. By the time you went through that the long transmission, you're spinning that long
two-piece drive line.
You're losing more horsepower. So that was my and then because you're always going to probably torque right, or you're going to torque a certain way, you're going to lose traction to one wheel, where a transverse engine is going to put the power down more evenly. Parasitic loss there.
Right. So you see why I think the front wheel drive version will be substantially better than a rear drive, because you're getting the power to the ground now and you're pulling out rather than having the vehicle being pushed out. So when you have the delay, my outlook is when you have the delay in getting the power to the ground, and now you have to push out this big 177-inch wheelbase Sprinter out of a silt bed. When you have power to the ground in the front, pulling it out is easier than pushing it out.
Same thing with a front-wheel drive car. Usually those work a lot better.
They always work better
for in the dirt.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Except for when you want to do a big Brody that suck.
Yeah, you're definitely not going to rooster tail a front drive Sprinter like you can the rear drive, but hey.
Hey, I want a rooster tail, okay?
I mean, let's talk about the time where our fearless cameraman decided to take our rear drive Sprinter through Chicken's Corner, water crossings and everything.
He's no chicken.
He's no chicken.
No chicken.
Wide open throttle. It ain't my car.
Well, I guess they
get
both
through,
work.
and it still works. The suspension.
Yeah, but I think with it being right underneath you, the power delivery's way more consistent, and you're pulling out of a situation rather than being pushed out of a situation.
All right. Second, my follow-up question. Do you know? I'll keep answering. Do you think that since it is emerging, and we've added shocks, there are some, but we need to then, the way the catalog works, we have to find the exact model that who's manufacturing it and link it to that, and we're on our way to do that right now. Someone could call up and get those shocks. We have them. We have them in our system. But do you think that's where van life is going to go? Are they going to ditch the rear-wheel drive? I see that obviously somebody who wants all-wheel drive, it wants to take this thing off-road, so they're going to be off-road. But somebody who is dancing between the rear-wheel drive Sprinter, and the front-wheel drive Sprinter.
I think it's dependent. I think a DIY guy is going to always want a rear-drive car, because can you imagine dropping the tranny out of the front?
I mean, I have.
Yeah, a front-drive car dropping the tranny out. Yanking out the axles, it's a lot more cumbersome and labor intensive than laying under the car, taking 10 bolts off and dropping the transmission down on your chest and rolling your creeper out from underneath it. It's far easier for a DIY guy to work on. But like, who's working on their own Sprinter? If you can if you can afford a Sprinter, likely you're not working on it yourself.
Yeah, I'd say that. That's probably a solid one. All right, let's talk about.
I think it'll lean more to the front drive car.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I think the coach builders are going to lean more towards that, and I think the DIY guys are going to probably stick with the more traditional.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's funny is we get a lot of people, since we do off-road shocks, that are into off-road vans, and we hear that a lot. But the manufacturers are going away from off-road vans, really, if they're going to switch to front-wheel drive. I mean,
well, really no, because they still build a four-wheel drive platform that's going to still be four-wheel drive. It's still going to be rear drive bias on a four-wheel drive.
But they're like really sending their bias towards just street-driven.
I don't know, because you drive to EJS and you see so many Jeeps being flat-towed behind a Sprinter. You know what I mean? And before, it was a class A or a class C or something, and you're getting less of that and more people downsizing because they're just a lot easier to drive. They're a lot, because like remember the class C days, the class A days when you drive
the class C days.
I love it, but if you say you have a class C and a rock crawler,
yeah,
you go to camp. What do you drive your rock crawler around where you need to go, or do you drive the camper? This gives you the option to have a class A that's far more maneuverable. So now you don't have to take the rock crawler to Vaughn's to get your groceries.
I mean,
you just
think it'd be cooler.
Take the Sprinter.
Yeah, but the point is
why do you think people are always building these Sprinters, man? Because they want to look cool towing their rock crawler to the desert.
Yeah, that's 100% why.
Yeah.
But I mean, people try to go off-roading with these things, and they do. But the vehicles really aren't designed for off-roading.
You know, so we're gonna have a episode 2 of this, because I'm gonna bring John Brindell.
Yeah.
AKA Agile Off-Road.
I think that'd be great. But that's going to be the off-road van segment of it. And this, realistically, that's why we were calling it.
But he does maintenance, too.
We were doing, RV, RV / modern, Class A, what we are calling in-house is camper van. We're calling, and that's a term that's used more globally as for a smaller RV, what you get in, through Europe, through Australia.
And that's what we have now.
Places. Yeah.
Right. So the ProMaster is basically a Fiat in Europe.
Yeah.
Right. And the big 3 makes them. You got Mercedes so you got Dodge.
You got the Fiat Ducato, right?
You got the Transit.
You got the Ford Transit, and you got the Sprinter. And those are, I would say, obviously you got the VW Crafter, but all that's in Europe. So you have some more variation.
It's crazy GM hasn't jumped into this game.
That's kind of what I was alluding to. So back to the off-road thing. I mean, because Sprinter just went to all-wheel drive. They were 4-wheel drive, and now they have an all-wheel drive. So they're like, the manufacturers are like getting out of the off-road. These vehicles are not designed for off-road. And Sprinter was really kind of the only one that was. And now they went to an all-wheel drive platform. They don't have did they have a low range at one point? Or they had like a locking transfer case.
On what?
On a Sprinter.
Yeah.
And now it's like an all-wheel drive.
Correct.
You can't go in and out of 2-wheel drive. It's not as good, really, right? So the question is, who's actually going to make an off-road van?
Well, it was never GM before. It was never Ford before. It was always outfits that did it for them. Quigley, Pathfinder Customs.
There've been plenty of people putting a solid front axle in the front of something that never had it for quite a while.
I feel like it's gotten so big in our culture for off-road. Like you go to Overland Expo and a third of it is vans.
It's crazy.
But all these vans are really just for carrying cargo. They're not for off-road.
Here's the thing. We go to I would say you find what you look for, right? So you're going to EJS. That is an off-road event. But there are people going to Yellowstone, Yosemite every day in RVs that have no intentions of going off-road any day.
And
but they still want their vehicles.
Means different things to different people.
I guess, absolutely. So I think that's the caveat to what we're saying about the front wheel drive, rear wheel drive argument, is that when you're going to go to one of these places, no matter what you're going to do, not every square inch of a national park is going to be paved. Probably most of it's going to be paved well enough, 90% of the time, that unless there's, some really bad weather, you're going to be able to take that van pretty much anywhere, even whether it's front wheel drive or rear wheel drive.
Well, let's get back to the influencer.
Okay.
The influencer is definitely not parked on the side of the road taking their pictures. They're like, there might be a road over here, but they're right in front of the lake taking the picture.
Yes.
They want to have that image of an off-road.
Yeah,
I'm adventuring like they're doing with CVs. But the thing is no, but these are vans for street. You know?
I don't know, man. I don't know if I agree, because some people, a fire road is considered off-road for them, right? They want to just cruise backcountry. And there's going to be areas where you require four-wheel drive. You have to go at a lot slower pace. The road is a little bit more aggressive, chopped up, chewed out, washed out, whatever it may be. You're going to cross these things with whatever you have, right? So I don't agree. I think people off-road these vans, but but think about it, dude. These things have cabinet stoves and a toilet in them. You can't off-road them the way you off-road your Bronco or your Rubicon, but they off-road them to the point where the cabinets won't fall out of them. You know what I mean? So they're purpose-built. They're that's the real overlander. Not the guy with a rooftop tent that's trying to make it through steel bender. That's not an overlander. That's a guy that's trying to make it through steel bender with an IFS car with a rooftop tent.
And then he's going to go back to his...
I knew we'd bring up 4Runner.
Everything.
All right, so anyways.
Always comes back
So to the real overlander is the guy that's traveling to get to a destination, to do camping, to lay out his rug, to put out his chairs and chill. That's an overlander. The guy that's trying to make it through steel bender with his rooftop tent to look like an overlander getting through steel bender, that's not an overlander.
You did bring up a solid point, because usually if you drive halfway across the country, you don't want to take too many chances.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So you want to kind of take it easy, so you really don't need...
Fire roads, washed out roads is great. I mean, you're not going to take a van past that, but that's still considered off-road.
It's true.
You know what I mean? It's not a serviced road. It's a graded, well, I shouldn't say that. It is a service road because that's why it's there, but it's not a maintained road.
I would just like to see...
It's an access road.
There you go.
I would like to see a manufacturer make a van that has got some off-road shops.
Yeah, but what van's going to make what shop's going to make a van with travel? When you're not going to be able to use the travel, because by the time you get through 4 inches of it, your toilet just blew off the floor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you got to make them to where they're capable to a point. And this is why JB is so a genius. Like
JB from Agile.
Yeah. So he has an Atlas case now for these things, so that they're not faster, but they're far more potent in the dirt. There's less chances of them getting stuck.
More traction.
ARB lockers for the rear, so that you can actually lock it up and motivate yourself through a silt bed. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? There's just, with a guy like JB behind the wheel and with the relationships he has with these manufacturers, dude, like, vans are very capable. They're far more capable than people are willing to take them even. Like, if you want to see someone wheel a Sprinter, watch some of JB's videos.
Yeah.
That's
because
true.
he integrity tests everything he sells. So he drives this van like he doesn't own it. He beats the life out of these things. He's currently testing a Dampmatic 4-wheel drive shock.
All right, let's get into it.
Let's go into that.
What do we got for these new vans?
I would say that I think you'd have to start with this, right? So this is a cutaway of a 46 mil monotube shock absorber. And so what you have here is, instead of what I'd say most, and from the factory, I would say that most dampers are going to be twin tube. We know the twin tube on the front, but in a very good case, they're going to be twin tube on the rear. So when you step into a B6, if it's going to be, you don't go to the Dampmatic. Yeah, I think you're going to see a big step up when you step in the monotube, and that's the first thing. You know, when if you step into a B6, that's going to be your it's going to be this design right here, right?
And what is the reason why a twin tube doesn't work as good as a monotube for this application?
Well, the size of your piston, essentially. That's your.
Well, I wouldn't say works as good. I think they equally have their place.
But I would say when you have that much extra weight in the rear, you need to, instead of holding it with a tiny bolt, you're now holding it with a much larger bolt, right? You have that much power, you have that much torque, and a larger piston is going to give you a greater feel, more surface area, and more fluid, and it has
more control.
More control.
And what's the other important thing a monotube does that
less
twin
shock
tube?
fade.
Bingo. Cancel Christmas. Less shock fade.
Cancel Christmas.
So when you are
and see people when you
hit that washboard, it's not going to instantly just give up the ghost. You're not going to be in the cavitation immediately, or even if you're as last time me and Chris were taking the 40 Highway 40 out to Flagstaff for Overland Expo.
Terrible.
Oh my goodness.
The big rigs just chop that road up.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you're going to be in the cavitation on a twin tube in an RV into that in no time. It's going to be taking a beating.
And it's beneficial to have them on the rear because that's where really all your weight is. Your toilet, your kitchen favors the rear of the axle, right? The rear of the RV. And I was just going to say that, like, you don't even have to be off-road. Like, if you've ever driven up the 5 all the way up north to Canada, the roads there are brutal. So if you have to get in the slow lane because
the trucks are destroying them.
Oh, the chatter that they get just chop that road up.
Remember that, because I'm gonna come back to that chatter. So essentially, what BILSTEIN has decided to do is make. We've had Sprinter shocks for quite a long time. We've had Transit shocks for a very long time, and we've had ProMasters shocks for a very long time. What we've decided to do is go back and have the guys in Germany use a test track, Poppenberg, and now
Don't ever call me that. Don't ever call me that.
They've created the B6 Camper and the B6 Camper Advanced Dampmatic line. And essentially, B6 Camper is going to be our B6. Let me start with B6. B6 is going to be, you'll be able to, if you have an empty box van and you're using it for service, if you've added some material in the back, say you have a small build out, B6 is going to be fine. If you got a full blown, you've got another 1,000 pounds you're carrying all the time, we have B6 Camper, and then that's going to be a little bit stiffer valving.
Stiffer, we don't like the word
stiffer.
A little more controlled valve.
A little bit more controlled.
Well, it's going to be stiffer because it's for a heavier vehicle.
We don't like the word stiffer.
It's a relative, yes.
Sean Reyes, we don't like the word stiffer.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, the shock has to be dampened, valved
differently in order to handle the weight.
Yes.
And then on top of that, we've added the ability to have the Dampmatic technology in it.
And what is the Dampmatic technology?
All right, this one's going to be a little bit.
Mr. Flanders.
Yeah, this one's going to be a little bit hard to show everybody at home. Essentially, what that is, but as you can see, you have a piston here in both. And let's see this one. This one it has nothing to do with the size. It just has to do with our cutaway. Our cutaway is a 36 millimeter tube versus our 46 mil here, but essentially. It's going to work the same way because we can offer it in 36, 46, and maybe even one of these days we'll offer it in 60 mil. So this technology has a lot of different uses and came from Mercedes. And so essentially what it is that you have 2 pistons. You have the piston here, and you've got
damping piston,
and then you have the Dampmatic piston inside. And this is the cutaway portion of it. And until now, every piston is connected directly to the piston rod. So that's a 1-to-1 relationship. When it pushes on the rod, you instantly push the piston, and you're going to have movement. You're going to be pushing against the oil at all times. What we have here is when you push on the piston, it moves this piston first and closes the valves in here before it works the outer piston. So that fine chop disappears because it's just movement of the spring until it closes that valve and pushes the fluid through the main piston.
And that's during higher shaft velocity.
No, it's during low shaft velocity.
But where the main piston kicks
when it
in
closes.
at high shaft velocity.
Exactly.
Correct.
High frequency.
High frequency movement will close the valving, close this dampmatic piston right here against the larger piston, pushing all the fluid through the main piston.
We call it high frequency, low displacement. Low displacement
God,
meaning
we're geniuses, man.
The guys, they are smart.
And when so clearly this is part of the reason why Mercedes are so compliant on the road, because during all the low velocity impacts in the chatter, they're not even working the damping piston, they're working the dampmatic piston. And then when the shaft velocity picks up, that's when your valving of the main piston really engages.
When you have a higher displacement movement. Low displacement movement with a
God, I'm learning so much.
With the dampmatic.
Well, it's great technology because you can take the same theory and apply it to racing. It depends on how many millimeters of movement that you want there. You want it to be plush and you want it to be cushy, you add a couple more millimeters. You want racing, you take out that small, finite, like 1 millimeter, you just, and where that dampmatic piston can then eat up that tiny little chopper vibration in the road. So there's many uses for this, but the guys in Germany spent 2 months on the Sprinter alone, dialing all this in at Papenburg. And when you were saying the road up the Pacific coast, in Papenburg, they specifically have a test road modeled after the 710 freeway.
Oh, very good.
So they have gone out there and they built this facility. It has like 13 different test tracks and high bank, oval, all these big things that you see. But then they have all these different surfaces that they can test on, and they've tested this to great lengths to create this valving to go in these dampers now. And the thing is you can't even when you see them, because the technology is completely inside. When you hold a dampmatic version next to a non-dampmatic version, it's going to be identical. You're not going to see any differences to it.
Identical.
But the technology, you're going to feel it when you drive.
Yeah.
That's essentially, and that's the idea behind it.
Just
better set it and forget it.
Better compliance through low speed chatter, and you're still not sacrificing your big hits because essentially that's when your main piston and your damping.
It'd be like whatever big hit or big input, you're cutting down the amount of input in every hit because you're not actually moving the piston that's going to create the feel immediately. So you're taking the higher points and smoothing it out, bringing it closer to.
And this is available in twin tube and mono tube.
Yes.
So that's hence why we do a 36 millimeter for our twin tube stuff.
Exactly.
Well, that's actually a monotube 36, but
yeah.
In the twin tube.
Yeah.
Yes.
That would be roughly the size of the inner working piston, right? In a twin tube damper.
So guys, if you don't want to get into the fender well of your Sprinter van and turn a knob to get a more compliant ride, just put a dampmatic shock on there because it's going to always be more compliant on your low velocity impacts. It's going to it's basically self-adjusting to the terrain that the wheel input's seeing.
This is going to be a game changer at the RV centers, in the future here. Everybody's going to say that, they will bought their RV, and eventually as the applications grow, as people become more aware of how the technology operates and works, this is going to be the instant, I bought my RV, I'm going to go change out my shocks. When you feel how compliant and how it changes the ride, you're going to really love it.
So this, guys, means a lot less creaking and moaning of the wood panels in the car because it's not getting, it's not trying to dampen that actually with the main piston. It's doing it with the dampmatic. So it's basically you got more real wheel movement that's taking that abuse rather than heading straight into a damping piston that's causing everything
right
else
into the body.
Right.
Think about what's going on in the silverware drawer.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow, chicka, wow, wow.
You know, a lot less chatter in that drawer.
Yeah.
You know, the silverware is just not going to.
Yeah, you're not going to have your forks jumping into your spoon area.
Not going to have that anymore.
It's going to be amazing.
It's going to be awesome.
Dinner's going to be that much easier to put together.
Yeah, there's going to be less, you know, black water sloshing around and
doing all.
Yeah, it's going to be a good deal, man.
Your black and gray water won't cavitate.
Yeah.
So, anyways, camper van advanced.
So, camper van advanced is Dampmatic. Camper van is just basically a shocked valve heavier to control additional load.
Yes.
Bingo. So we got all. So really, everyone should just get a Dampmatic.
Yes, I would say. I mean, it's the company's motto, right? Is not one size fits all. So while some people believe that, like, hey, this one shock, and you look at our competitors, this is the product offering that works for this vehicle, no matter what it's doing or how much weight is in it or where it's traveling in the world or anything. This is their offering. We, on the other hand, you know, because we have so many experts, know that they can sit there and say, like, hey, this is going to be roughly this weight range, this is going to be this weight range, and this is going to be this. And they're, you know, the company sees the value in it, you know. And so that's the main reason we offer a number of different variants, you know, in this category, because one size does not fit all. And we have, in many cases, you'll have the 3 offerings on the front, and you'll have the 3 offerings on the rear. So we'll have B6, B6 Camper, and B6 Camper Advanced Dampmatic on the rear.
And this damper here kind of touches on what we went over last week about the McPherson strut versus a coilover. If you put that shock up, you could see how big that piston rod is.
It's a beefy piston rod.
That's because it's a McPherson strut style. There's no upper control arm on this shock absorber for this suspension style. So that damper is load bearing.
Yes. It has a 28 millimeter piston rod.
Correct. 28 millimeter. So this makes me wonder how these manufacturers that are building quote unquote off-road suspension for Sprinter vans are getting away with a 7/8 piston rod when it's a load bearing.
Are you giving away some secrets?
No, I'm not. So let's move on.
Well, you know, safety's there'll be no shortage of testing on that.
Let's touch on the high end stuff. There's sorry to cut you off, but there is a lot of higher end because people like to off-road these things. Off-road companies jumping into this, maybe with rebuildable shocks, things like that. And I think you need to ask yourself, as a consumer, you might be older, you might be wanting to travel across the country. Do you want to rebuild your shocks in the middle of your trip?
Or
is that yes or no?
Not even is it just do I need to rebuild them, but can this take the side load?
Yeah, exactly. Can it even like hold up?
Can this take all the side load that this, like the motion ratio on that Sprinter suspension is
massive.
Gnarly. And it's load bearing on top of it. It's a transverse leaf front end. Is this damper able to carry the load? Is it support? Is this, because basically, guys, that piston rod takes the place of an upper control arm.
And this is an OE quality, OE replica shock. You can basically bet your life on it.
It's just valved heavier, and it has a Dampmatic piston in it.
Lifetime warranty.
Yep.
We don't expect you to ever have to replace this shock.
It's a lifetime warranty against manufacturer defects, not launching your Sprinter off a cliff.
This is not something you'll ever need to rebuild, ever.
No, it's just it's
zero service. It's cameraman rated.
Yeah. but the biggest part of it is the load bearing. I don't think people realize the meaning of a strut, a McPherson strut that carries load, that has load bearing property in it. There's more to it than just bolting a shock absorber on there.
There's more to it than anodized aluminum parts and some shiny stuff. I mean, you're riding on this thing. This thing has to not.
That is bearing the load of what an upper control arm would bear.
We have been talking, McPherson struts, and I know that every time that we talk about it, like I think people think that the McPherson strut is just like, they don't give it any thought because it's not going in your lifted truck. It's not on your full-blown race car. And so they think that but they don't realize how, in order to get rid of that control arm, how sturdy a piece of equipment this needs to be when you decide to make this one object do two different things.
Right. So put this in perspective. A Volkswagen Jetta has a ginormous piston rod because it has no upper arm. It's a McPherson front.
With a 22 millimeter piston rod.
No, it's a much larger than that. So, but
the
people,
inverted
yeah.
version,
So, but they ask, well, why do my 2500 HD 5100s have a 14 mil piston rod? Well, because your upper and your lower arm are sharing the load bearing properties.
Wait, go back. Change that to a 4Runner guy. A 4Runner guy asks you that.
4Runner guy asks, why is my piston rod 14 millimeters on my 5100? Because you're sharing the load bearing properties with an upper and lower. You have a dual wishbone suspension. So there's a less force and less load being put on the damper.
Side load.
Correct. So when you don't have that, you have to pick up that force somewhere, and it's in the rod.
Yep. It's in this.
It's in that there.
Well, we should bring, when we started this, I asked the question, why are they so popular now, these vans, Euro-style vans? They have McPherson struts. They're way more efficient. Like, usually a vehicle with a McPherson strut, I mean, they're kind of like designed like a huge car, right?
Yeah, they basically are.
And they're just, I'm sure they're lighter than an E350, right? And they get better gas mileage. They have more efficient suspension, like with McPherson struts, like you have with a car. And so you can drive these things. They're not going to eat you out of house and home driving across the country, because they get
with your Triton V10 and your E350. You're stopping at every gas station. You have to plan ahead. Whereas I remember that year I drove our Sprinter, which is a 4-cylinder, 2.1 liter, and I could have probably made it to Moab. Like, I never needed gas. I was following these clowns in their Jeeps with 40s on them, and they were stopping at every other gas station. So I filled up by default, but the needle would never move, and it's bitching.
So it's just a lot more realistic to travel the country with these vehicles.
I definitely think the newer, let's just say that just like almost any new vehicle, they're more reliable, more dependable, get better gas mileage, have better drive, road manners, and I think that's what is making them so popular. And then they give you the ability to that freedom to go out and go see places and not have to worry about it. But we have been seeing a number of complaints about how they ride when they're out there doing that. That'd be I think the characteristics of these vehicles are becoming, so compliant and so much like a home, and they ride so much like a car, that the minute you add all that weight and it doesn't ride like that anymore, people are looking for something in order to smooth that all out.
Yeah, because the coach manufacturers, they don't change the suspension. They just build a big coach on it, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
So if you got, some of them do, but if you've got the stock shocks on there, realistically, you're going to want to upgrade. And you're just going to have let's just face it, these things are pretty tall. If a wind hits it on the side, you need that stability.
Oh yeah,
every
when the wind hits,
overlay,
it'll get the stability control acting up.
That's what somebody, all the Sprinter guys come talk to me about that. They're like, is there anything in I couldn't say, at the time we only offered the B6, and so I'm selling a shock that has to handle something from bone stock and the camper. So now we have something that can really help them with that sway in the wind, and that essentially, I've heard that people are, when they pull in and out of stations and they're just rocking back and forth, they're like, is there anything I can do to get that to stop? And I'm just like, well, you know, at the moment, valving to get rid of the sway is going to make the regular driving, you know, that much more rough. And so now with Dampmatic technology, I think that we're able to build up a little bit more sturdiness in the main piston because we have that flexibility in the Dampmatic.
That's awesome.
It's gonna be a game changer.
Well, very good.
Were these tested on the Nürburgring?
No.
Okay.
Papenburg. So, you know, slightly different, but lots and lots of testing by Mike's team.
Well, it's cool to see some technology from Mercedes
making its way into
aftermarket.
Aftermarket day-to-day life in real-world uses
And
outside of.
And for the
S-Class.
consumer that feels like they need an exterior knob, otherwise it's not adjustable, or otherwise they're not going to get their needs fulfilled, try the shock. It's a game changer. It really is. You get all that compliance in you know, and you still have all your heavy damping on the high shaft movement. It's pretty sick.
I'd say just give us a shot. We've heard, you know, we've taken the requests at multiple overlanding events, you know, with all the guys from the vans, and we finally have been able to put together a product offering that we think solves those problems.
Well, very good. So we covered. So I'm going to play Mike's role here. We covered a B6, B6 camper, B6 camper advanced. We also talked about how we have B6 monotube shocks for old vans, like 1970s
Creep vans.
B vans, Dodge, GMs. We also have a lot of E350s.
Oh yeah,
lots of those.
E450s. We also have a lot of shocks for some diesel pusher.
Oh yeah, Monaco, Spartan, which I think that's a Spartan chassis right there.
So Bilstein's been in the RV game for quite some time, so it's pretty interesting to see how these new vans have come to light, and a lot of people gravitating towards them.
There's not another shock manufacturer globally that has the coverage we have. So we have coverage for the RV that you're towing
to your NASCAR
rock
event.
Crawler out.
No, remember
even the NASCAR, yeah.
Yeah, when you went to when you were taking your RV, we made the RV shocks, and then we were on the NASCARs going around the track all the time. So
And
that's
then
when we were bigger,
so we can
much
be
bigger
on
in
your
the
RV.
RVs.
We could be on your rock crawler that you're towing in the desert. We can be on your wife's Mercedes SUV, and we can be on your weekend Lamborghini Gallardo.
It's amazing. So, anyways, folks, thanks for listening.
Tell me what shock manufacturer has more coverage. I'll wait. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.